Welcome back to the Pearls and Pearls podcast. I'm your host, Peta-Kay. In today's episode, we'll be talking about friendship, making and maintaining friendship in adulthood specifically, which I know for a lot of people can be quite challenging to navigate. And it's really funny because lately I've been seeing so much content online surrounding friendship. And a few months ago, I had watched a video that my husband was watching on YouTube, as he does, and it was talking about the loneliness epidemic, specifically in Japan, I believe it was. Was it Japan? I think it was Japan. If it's not Japan, I may edit this out. But it was just talking about the fact that there's a lot of young people, specifically affecting the millennial generation, that do not have friends. And there are a lot of people that are lonely. And there's even this service where people pay for friends. They pay for someone to talk to just share their hobbies with, which honestly is really sad. I know that, business is about providing a service or product that people need, but the fact that just the basic human need of connection and friendship and relationship is something that people are having to pay for because they're struggling to find. I've been wanting to do this episode for a while now, speaking about this topic, but I've just prioritized other things over this. And I thought now is the right time. The algorithm keeps reminding me that I need to go back to this episode. So here we are today. I want to start off by reading something to you, which is more specific to the UK. But I do know that this loneliness epidemic is not just something that's happening in the UK, it is also happening in other parts of the world as well. According to the Campaign to End Loneliness, in 2022, 50% of adults, which is about over 25 million people in the UK, reported feeling lonely occasionally, sometimes, often, or always. Now that figure is up to 58%. That is a lot. If you're thinking about 58%, that's like one in two people, if my math serves me correctly. That is a really, really high number. And considering all the tools now we have in our society through technology to help us to be more connected to other people, I do find it interesting now that we are a generation that is a lot more lonely. Well, we're a generation that's experiencing loneliness a lot more than older generations that didn't have the technology that we do, which allows us to connect with different people, allows us to connect with our families that live abroad and so on. So I do find it really interesting that this is an issue that's prevalent. But of course, there are many things that have changed in our society and in the way that we even have relationships and the way our family structures are, which definitely has had an impact on this. I want to start off by talking about maintaining friendships. Now, this is something that is incredibly hard, and I've experienced this too. Once you start working full time or you're studying full time, you're doing anything full time, it just becomes really difficult to actually maintain friendships, especially when you're not seeing people all the time. It's easy when you're in school or you're in college or even in university when all your friends are in the same uni as you and you're able to see each other, or even when your schedules are a lot more flexible or you have specific periods of time, let's say summer holidays or breaks, term breaks, where you have that dedicated time where you can have some downtime, you can meet up with friends and so on. But once you start navigating adulthood, having more responsibilities, it can be so difficult to maintain friendships, especially as you get older and you go through different life changes. For instance, you start having children, or your friends have children, or they get married, or they move further away from where you are, or if your friendships are predominantly with people from where you work, when they move on to another job, that then changes the friendship dynamic. So all of these changes can have a huge impact on your friendships, and it can be quite difficult to maintain friendships when you are just trying to juggle everything. You're trying to keep yourself sane, you're trying to have a life. It can be very, very difficult. And I think also the fact that not everyone is somebody that likes talking on the phone. Some people prefer messages. And I think when you have friends that are all quite different and the way that they communicate is different, the way that they prefer to communicate is different, it can be quite difficult to actually juggle your friendships and actually find time to meet up, to speak, to catch up on life. It can be really difficult. And then there's also the issue of growing apart. As you grow and develop and change, and your interest changes, your perspective on life changes, naturally, sometimes that causes you to grow apart from friendships that you had. And I think it's important when it comes to growing apart to not always see it as a bad thing. I think it can be something that's really natural. It's never something that's easy to deal with, especially when you've had a really deep connection with someone, you've gone through things together, you've been through ups and downs in your friendships, you've seen each other at your lowest highs and all these sorts of things. It can be quite difficult to come to the realization that you have grown apart, to come to the realization that your friendship is never going to be the same. And it doesn't always have to end in a negative way. It doesn't have to always end in a way of malice where it's like, oh, I'm cutting them off and never going to speak to them again. There are friendships that I have had personally where we've grown apart. There's no bad blood. There's nothing bad I would say about the person. We've simply just grown apart, and because we're not necessarily in the same circles anymore, or we're not seeing each other physically anymore, we just don't speak as much, or even nobody really makes the effort to reach out to meet up. And I guess it's just kind of a thing where it just falls off the radar, and it's a natural thing that happens. It's almost like a natural progression. It's not necessarily something that's been intentional, well, not necessarily on my end, but these things do happen. And I think it's important. I think something, as I'm getting older now, I'm starting to see my friendships in different ways. When I was younger, I always had this mindset, especially with my really close friends and those that, I sort of envisioned us being friends forever. The idea for me, I always saw friendship as a forever thing. Like, we're gonna be friends forever, ride or die. We're gonna be each other's bridesmaids, gonna be each other's godparents for our kids, and all these kind of things. But as I have gotten older and I've realized, not all friendships are forever, and that is okay. There's nothing wrong with a friendship ending. Some relationships are seasonal. There are some friendships that will stand the test of time. You are going to be friends till you're old, in the nursing home or whatever it is. But there are some friendships where it is seasonal. There are some friendships where you are there in each other's life for a season. You help each other for a season. There's things that you have in common for a season, but then you grow, you evolve, you change, and things just naturally fizzle out. It's not always, like I said, a malicious thing where you have an argument and you don't talk to each other anymore. It's not always the case. Sometimes there are natural instances where you grow apart. And I think sometimes if you are that kind of person that you romanticize friendships in the sense of thinking that this needs to be forever, it's something you have to learn to accept and be okay with. And also being able to move on in love, keeping things amicable with that person, not holding on to any resentment, because as I said, we do grow apart, and that's not always a bad thing. You still have the memories, you still have those experiences that you went through together, and that is okay. It is okay to move on. It is okay to grow and develop, because even sometimes if you are that person, as I was, I would always try to hang on to my friendships even when I could sense that we were growing apart. Things were changing, we weren't necessarily close anymore, like proximity wise, we lived far away. It was difficult to keep up communication, or just even our interests were different. We didn't have as much to talk about anymore. The only things that bonded us were things we went through in the past. It was really hard for me to accept in friendships that I knew that we had grown apart, for me to accept that and move on. It was really hard. I tried my best to hang on, to hold on to the friendship, until I kind of came to that realization, as I shared earlier, that not all friendships are forever, and that is okay. Some friendships are for a season, and whilst you're in that season, enjoy it, soak it up, learn what you can from that person, and also help that person, be a good friend to them as you can. Because even in the cycle of life, as I said, maybe for a season you guys are meant to be friends, you grow apart, and then years later you become friends again. I have friendships like that where we were friends when we were younger, things kind of fell off, we grew apart, we were doing other things, and then naturally we come back together again, and we're friends again now as adults. So things sometimes do go through a cycle, but really is a matter of just accepting that, being okay with that, and also having a mindset of understanding that, listen, there are plenty of good friends out there. It's like finding a romantic partner. There are plenty of good people out there. Yes, there are people out there that aren't necessarily out here for your good. They just care about themselves. You have that. But there are good friends out there. There are people that are looking for friends. Sometimes it can feel difficult when it feels like everyone already has their friendship circle. They already have people that they're close to, and not everyone necessarily presents themselves as being open to making new friends. But don't go into this with a scarcity mindset of thinking, oh, everybody has their friends, I'm never going to find anyone else. And you kind of hang on to friendships that are dead simply because you feel like you're not going to be able to make any more friends. And I guess as adults, it is difficult. It does get more difficult to make friends as you get older, because you kind of don't want to feel like you're begging friends with people, or that you're desperate. You don't want to necessarily put yourself in a position to be rejected. When you're a child in primary school or even early secondary school, you can ask someone like, oh, will you be my friend? And that's okay. But obviously, as an adult, you're not going to be like, oh, can we be friends? And it's funny because I've been seeing so many videos like this, showing the difference of how you'd make friends as a child, and now if you were to repeat those things as adults, how you would seem. And I know that it can be hard, especially when your pride gets involved. And even because we want to protect ourselves, we don't want to get hurt. But if you are in a position where you're like, do you know what, Peta-Kay, I really don't have many friends. A lot of my friendships, we have just grown apart. My friends have moved. We don't live close to each other anymore. It's quite difficult to maintain a relationship just by speaking on the phone. I will say, and I think one thing I've realized is that I could have never done the long distance relationship thing. It is really hard to maintain a friendship just by speaking on WhatsApp or FaceTime or whatever it is. For me, I need to see you. I need to, like, even if it's not all the time, because a lot of my friends, I don't see them like on a monthly basis. It might be like every 2 or 3 months that we do meet up physically. And for me, that is okay because we catch up, we have fun together, and it feels like we spoke to each other every single day. But for me to really have a deep connection and a close relationship with someone, it does involve physically meeting up, even if it's like every other month or every couple of months. Just speaking via WhatsApp or via message, for me, it just doesn't build a strong connection. It doesn't feel like real friendship to me. Yes, I can speak to anyone by sending them memes and having conversations that way, sending the odd voice note here and there, but there is that element of actually needing to physically meet up. So I can imagine how difficult it is if most of your friendships, the only way that you're able to communicate is via phone. It's not easy to maintain a friendship that way. And especially as you get busy, sometimes it's difficult to always be responding to notifications. And even there are moments when you are just tired and you can't be bothered to reply to no one. You don't want to be on no apps. You just want to be at peace. You just want to chill. You don't want to be on apps and talking to people. You really just want to be in your own space. Maintaining friendships simply just by technological basis can get difficult because there are the things that come into play, such as different schedules. If you're in a different time zone, like sometimes it's difficult for me to speak to my mom. We're in a different time zone. I'm not sure if she's awake or not, if she's at work or not, and vice versa. So when you're dealing with different time zones, different schedules, all these different things, it can be difficult. And also when you have situations where people take long to reply, or maybe you're the person that you might take days to reply, it can be difficult to keep meaningful conversation when you do have those things coming into play. So I understand how difficult it can be to maintain friendships in adulthood, especially with busy lives and the life changes. And even sometimes when you are both at different stages in your life, you may feel like you don't have a lot in common anymore. Maybe the things that brought you together initially, you no longer have those things in common. And it can be then difficult to maintain those friendships. However, there's another aspect that I want to talk about, which is about dealing with conflict. Sometimes what happens in situations where friendships aren't maintained is dealing with conflict. It's actually verbalizing and speaking about things that maybe your friend has said or not said, or where expectations have not been met, actually having those conversations with your friend. There's so many friendships, unfortunately, that have ended because of things that were never spoken about. Someone was upset about something, they held on to it, they never really vocalized how it affected them or how they interpreted the situation, because sometimes it's not even a direct thing or a specific thing that has been done that is wrong. It's someone's perception of it. It's how someone has interpreted that event. It's their experience. And if you aren't open with your friends and speaking about things that bother you, speaking about things that may have hurt you or offended you or you didn't appreciate, and you don't have those conversations, sometimes those are the reasons why people grow apart, because you don't actually speak about the things that bother you, and you just kind of put things under the carpet. And as we do evolve and our life changes, it's so important for us to learn to deal with conflict in our friendships. And it's not even always conflict. Sometimes it's just difference of opinion, difference of perceiving a situation in a different way. And it's just a matter of putting on your big girl pants or big boy pants and just saying, you know what, I didn't like that. That hurt me. Let's talk about this, and having those difficult conversations. Don't run away from this, because if you repeat this pattern, you're always going to find yourself going through the same cycle, the same pattern in all your friendships. And then it's easy to come to the conclusion that, oh, do you know what? I don't need friends. What's the point of having friends if I'm always going to be going through this? Sometimes you're going through the same cycles, not necessarily because everyone is bad and everyone is toxic and out to get you, but sometimes there are certain things that maybe you're doing that is contributing to that pattern repeating itself. So sometimes it's important for us to be reflective and look at ourselves. Like, one of the things that I struggled with early on in my 20s with my friendships was that I always felt like I was the one that was always making the effort in certain friendships. I always felt like, certain people, they didn't make an effort. They'd only reach out to me if they needed something. And in those situations, I kind of made myself a little bit like the victim, and I would just feel upset about it. But in some cases, I never vocalized that to those people. And also, I was allowing that cycle to repeat itself. But then when I came to that realization and it was like, do you know what? I don't want this to continue. I started speaking up. I started saying, do you know what? I feel like you only reach out when you need something. And of course, it was uncomfortable for people to hear that. And it was also uncomfortable for me to really be confronting and saying that. But it made such a huge difference. In some friendships, it fizzled out. In some friendships, it actually strengthened our relationship by me being honest and saying how I felt, saying how their lack of effort or not responding or not making an effort or canceling at the last minute, those sort of things, how that affected me and how I felt that was affecting the friendship. So having the difficult conversation really did make a difference. And sometimes when you do have those conversations, it can be make or break, but it's better to have the conversation than just to sweep things on the rug and hope it's going to get better, because trust me, it won't. And when you do that, this is where situations come about where you become frenemies because you have resentment, you have things going on inside that you're not speaking about, things aren't healing, and you both just end up hurting each other and you're not helping anyone. What's the point of having a friend that's really an enemy? It's pointless. So having those conversations, learning how to deal with conflict is so, so important. And another aspect I want to touch on before I move on to making friendships, because maybe your issue or your challenge right now isn't necessarily maintaining friendships, maybe it's making new friends. I will touch on that. The other aspect I think is really important for maintaining friendships in adulthood is expectations. Sometimes the expectations that we have of our friends can be very unrealistic. Perhaps you have an expectation that your friends should be there whenever you need them. You know, they need to always listen to you, always be a listening ear, or they always need to show up in a specific way. And I guess what you have to understand is you're dealing with humans. People also have their own problems. People also have their own challenges that they're going through. And I think there's an element in friendship where you got to give people some grace. Now, I don't mean giving people grace to take advantage of you or to be abusive or to really just, take advantage. No, there's an element sometimes where you've got to kind of put yourself in someone else's shoes. If someone keeps repeating the same behavior and you're actually speaking about it and they're just not changing, that's different. But in situations where someone may have done something that's out of character or it's not a normal behavior that they have, maybe they didn't show up for you in the way that you wanted, or there's a shift, there's a change in your friend, and you're like, what's going on? Like, you're never like this. You're always reliable. What's going on with you? Sometimes it's really just giving that person some grace and seeing what are they going through. Because if you're that friend that every conversation always has to be about you, what you're going through, and you don't even stop to make space in those conversations to see how that person is, there's a difference between asking someone, oh, how are you doing? You're just waiting for a response, moving on and bringing it back to you again, and truly being interested in what your friend is going through, truly being interested in your friend's interest. Those sort of things also can affect friendships where it's very one-sided in the sense that it's all about one particular person and what they're going through, and they are always the center of everything. Having a balance and also being a friend. Sometimes we want to have a good friend, but you have to ask yourself the question, am I a good friend? I say I want to have good friendships. I say that I want healthy friendships and all this good stuff, but am I this kind of friend that I am wanting? And just ensuring that your expectations are realistic. Remember, you're dealing with people. People are not perfect. They make mistakes. Not putting your friends on a pedestal, not expecting them to be everything to you. They have limits, and also giving that space that they will make mistakes. So having realistic expectations is going to be very important. And even sometimes actually speaking about what your expectations are, sometimes we're so disappointed for things that we have never vocalized. If there is something that is important to you, speak to your friend about it. If you feel like you can't speak about it, then you got to ask yourself why. Is it because you don't feel confident in speaking about that, or you don't know how to communicate that expectation, or you don't feel the person's going to receive it well? It's important for you to really think about those things. You can't hold people to a standard that they don't even know about, or hold people to a standard that you yourself aren't able to actually live up to. So I think there definitely is an element where you have to give people grace. People go through challenges, we go through life changes, and this sometimes affects how we show up in our friendships. If somebody 99% of the time is a great friend and maybe 2% of the time or 1% of the time things happen and they're not a good friend, have a bit of grace. Speak to them about it as well. Don't just stew on things, speak to other people about it, but don't speak to them. Have the conversations. Make space in your relationships where you can speak about your feelings, and you can also listen to them and see, what's up with you? How are things going for you? And remembering that friendship also is a two-way street. It's not always just about you and your interests. It's also being interested in your friends' interests and their life as well. Now let's move on to making friendships in adulthood. I know this is the part that can be quite difficult. Once you get to a certain age where you're not in school anymore, you're not studying anymore, you're not maybe going to volunteering clubs that you might have done so you could add it on your personal statement. It can be difficult to meet new people and make friendships when you don't necessarily have those spaces anymore that you go to. A couple of things that I would suggest if you find yourself in this situation is you need to start socializing, okay? You need to start getting out. And there's so many different things that you can do. So for example, let's say you are someone who you enjoy reading. Go on Meetup or a website that shows things going on in your area. So maybe look for a book club that has maybe for your gender or people that have a similar interest to you, and start going to these different kinds of events that link to your interests. If there's a sport that you really enjoyed playing when you were younger or you want to learn, look for meetups that have that particular sport, because in that way you're going to be able to meet new people that have some kind of common interest with you. They like that sport too, or maybe they're a beginner just as you are, and you're going to be able to meet different people. You're going to be able to have that space or even that conversation point to talk about. And you just never know the people you're going to meet, the friendships that you might build. But it's important for you to get out of your comfort zone and actually get out and socialize. Because if you're not going to anywhere besides home, work, I don't know, maybe church or religious place of worship that you go to, you're not going to meet anyone new. You're not going to meet anyone. There aren't going to be any opportunities for you to actually make any friends. So definitely get some hobbies, or if you had hobbies that you've abandoned, get back to those hobbies. Start putting yourself in situations where you can meet new people and be open to making new friendships. If you're someone that you're very closed off, or even when people try to make conversation with you, you can be standoffish, it's going to be very difficult for you to make friends, because one, people aren't going to feel confident to have conversations with you, and also they're going to think, oh, you're not even interested in what I'm talking about, so they're not going to make an effort. And also remember, sometimes you need to shoot your shot. If you meet someone, you think, oh, this person's really cool, I really like them, I think we'd get on really well. Like, don't be afraid to just be like, oh, do you have Instagram or whatever it is? Do you mind like sharing socials? So if you don't necessarily have the confidence to be like, oh, do you want to exchange numbers? You can just be like, oh, are you on TikTok or whatever social media platform you're on, or are you on LinkedIn, whatever it is, and get their social handle. And then that way you can start engaging with their content, engaging with, the things that they're doing. And sometimes even naturally just through that, you can build a friendship, you can kind of build some kind of relationship with that person, and you just never know where it's going to grow to. So don't be afraid to shoot your shot. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because sometimes you're gonna need to do it. I know it's one of the most uncomfortable parts of being an adult, but sometimes you just have to challenge yourself, especially if you are trying to get out of your comfort zone and do something different. So that's definitely something to consider as well. And as I said previously, I do want to repeat this point again. To have good friends, you need to be a good friend. Remember that. Am I a good friend? How do I show up in the friendships that I have now? Are they friendships that I currently have now that I'm not really putting any effort in, that I can change, that I can work on? Are there people in my circle or people within my sphere of influence or work or whatever it is that you're doing that could potentially be a friend, but maybe you've just never given that person a chance? Because sometimes that happens. We judge people based on our first impression of them, and we think, oh, we don't really have anything in common. But maybe you do. Maybe there's plenty of things you have in common, or maybe there's so many things that you can learn from that person, and vice versa. So just being open is going to be really important. But specifically for anyone that wants to make new friends, and you feel like the places that you regularly go to now doesn't give you the space to make new friends, start socializing. Pick an interest, pick something that you want to learn or you want to develop on, and start looking for events that you can go to. If you're someone that you're not really quite into, like let's say networking events, then look for social events that you can go to. There's so many different types of meetups. There's meetups for everything these days. And even if you feel like, oh, I'm a bit of a nerd, or I'm a bit weird, or I'm not a very social person, there are also people just like you who are looking for friends as well. So don't feel like you are so unlovable or so different that there's not going to be anyone. Listen, there is someone for everyone, whether that's romantic or platonic. There definitely is. So don't kind of write yourself off or put yourself down and think that, oh, I'm not going to meet anyone. I'm not going to make any friends. Listen, even the seemingly biggest loner has a friend, has at least one friend, or can have friends. So don't write yourself off in that aspect. To summarize this episode, I do also want to add, if you've listened to today's episode and you're like, you know, Peta-Kay, I am happy, have good friendships. I already have my circle. I don't need no more friends. Hashtag no new friends. One thing I would say is be open. Be open to new friendships. Having new friendships doesn't mean that you're going to abandon your old friends. Growing and developing and maybe outgrowing your friends, quote unquote, or having different interests, that doesn't necessarily mean you should put people away and discard them and just focus on people that fit your current state of life. Be open to having different kinds of friends. Be open to having friends with different interests. There are different stages in their life. Your friendships and friends that you have do not always need to reflect who you are at that present stage of your life. There's friends that I have that I can learn from in many different ways. There's friends that I have that are older than me. There's friends that I have that are younger than me. There are friends that I have that have children, that don't have children, that are single. There are friends that I have that are divorced or going through a divorce. I have a lot of different kinds of friends. And do you know what? It is such a blessing to have, because there's something you can learn from every single person and vice versa. And there's so many things that I learn from my friends, and different friends, they add different things to my life. Some friends, they're always a good time. We can just be around each other doing nothing and just have a really good time. Some friends, they make me laugh. Some friends I have deep conversations with about different things. Some friends I can speak to about business ideas and struggles I'm having in business or finance or whatever it is. There's some friendships we talk about relationships a lot. There's some friendships that we speak about God and our relationship with Him a lot. So there's friends I have for different things. They serve different purposes. And I'm sure that for me as their friend, I also probably serve a different purpose in comparison to other friends. But this is where the beauty of friendship and connection and community comes in, that you can have a variety of people in your life that adds different things, that are able to add to your life in a different way, and also the same for you. So I think it's just important to just be open. Whether you feel like, you know, you already have all the friends you need, just be open to having different relationships, to having different types of people in your life. Of course, people that are going to be healthy and, you know what I mean, right? But also, if you have gone through a lot of negative experiences in your friendships, a lot of hurt, a lot of heartbreak, friendship breakups can be really, really difficult. They can hurt you, they can cut you at the core. Because sometimes your friends, they see you at all the stages, they see you as your authentic self. There's no pretense, there's no trying to put your best foot forward when it's a true friendship. You just show up as you are, you're yourself, and you go through things that even sometimes in a romantic relationship, you may not necessarily show so soon in the relationship. So I know how difficult sometimes it can be when you go through negative experiences in friendships to open up your heart again. But there are good friends out there. There are solid people out there. So don't write off everyone because of one person or two people, or however many people that have hurt you. Don't allow those experiences to rob you of wonderful friendships that you can have, of wonderful relationships that you can have, that can really add to your life and that can really add to the quality of your life. I just feel like friendships, and when you have good connection in your life, it can make such a difference. It can have so much value to you than having a very full bank account. It just gives a different kind of joy and fulfillment. So just be open. Be open to new friendships. Be open to making an effort, because friendships and relationships require work, it requires effort. And sometimes the level of effort changes. Sometimes what you are able to give changes depending on your capacity, depending on what you're going through, and also the same for your friends. So giving them that grace, as I spoke about earlier. I hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. I want to know your thoughts. Do you find it difficult to make or maintain friendships in adulthood? If you're listening on Spotify, I will have a poll, so do engage with it. I want to know your thoughts on today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, if you could relate in any way, then of course share it with a friend. If you're listening and you are not already following the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to, then please follow. Don't forget, leave a rating or review. It makes such a huge difference as far as people being able to find the podcast, listen to the podcast. If you've gotten right to the end, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great rest of your week, a great rest of your month of April, and I'll be back with you in the next episode.